Good day, you're watching Businessworld Live. I'm Jes Delos Santos and here are today's top stories. The Bangko Sentral is expected to hike rates by another 75 basis points after inflation reached a multi-year high in October. The Monetary Board will meet later this week. President Marcos is back in the country from his trip to Cambodia for the ASEAN and related summits. Despite describing his debut at the regional meet as, quote, successful, the president admits that there was no real progress made on the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea. Metro Pacific Investment Corp says it will be interested in taking over the operations and maintenance of the MRT-3 and LRT Line 2 if the government bids out the contracts. And authorities in the Bahamas will be conducting a criminal probe into the collapse of FTX. But what happens to the crypto space now that FTX has filed for bankruptcy? Let's begin our broadcast with the Bangko Sentral poised to deliver another jumbo rate hike this week, a move which analysts said is appropriate to curb soaring inflation and to prop up the peso. BSP Governor Felipe Medalla reiterated that the central bank is ready to follow the U.S. Federal Reserve's decision to increase rates by 3/4 of a point. Medalla said that since the Fed hiked by another 75 basis points, he will be voting to raise the policy rate by a similar magnitude. This as inflation accelerated to a near 14-year high of 17.7% in October, marking the 7th straight month that the CPI breached the Bangko Sentral's 2 to 4% target band. Since March, the U.S. Fed has increased rates by 375 basis points to 3.75 to 4%, while the Bangko Sentral has hiked rates by 225 basis points to 4.25%. Governor Medalla says keeping a comfortable differential between domestic policy rate and that of the U.S. will lend support to the peso. The Monetary Board will meet on Thursday, November 17th. Now, President Marcos has returned to the Philippines following his 4-day trip to Cambodia for the 40th and 41st ASEAN summits. In a nutshell, Marcos said the trip was a success. Marcos arrived at the Villamor Air Base in Pasay past midnight. Marcos says his trip to Cambodia was fruitful as he was able to update our ASEAN neighbors on the state of the Philippines and the programs of his administration. The president held bilateral talks with state officials from countries like China, South Korea, and Japan. He was also able to meet Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and U.S. President Joe Biden.
I am pleased to report that my visit to Cambodia for the 40th and 41st ASEAN Summit was successful. Of course, I updated them on what is happening in the country right now, the programs, the policies of our administration. For me, it was a very interesting experience because it's the first one that I've been to.
The president says he also met with the Filipino community in Cambodia before heading back to the Philippines. Marcos adds that he urged Cambodian business leaders to visit the Philippines to find investment opportunities in our small and medium enterprises. Marcos will again leave the country on November 16 for the APEC summit set to be held in Thailand.
I invited the business leaders to visit and have a look at what the opportunities that they might find in the Philippines. Our discussions touched on collaborations on specific sectors such as food processing, energy, housing, medical care, the manufacture of garments, bags, education, training.
Now, despite the success of the ASEAN summit, Marcos admits that there was no real progress made on the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea. Marcos says he repeatedly pressed the matter during his interventions at the ASEAN summits. Many ASEAN leaders also agreed on the importance of peace and prosperity in the South China Sea. Marcos says he is still hoping that a code of conduct will be finalized soon to reduce the risk of tension in the disputed waters.
Paulit-ulit na sinabi ko, it is urgent. It is becoming more and more urgent. There's been some progress in the past year, but we really need to have the actual code of conduct already finalized and already in place as soon as possible.
President Marcos also admitted that there were no formal agreements signed during his bilateral meetings with other heads of states on the sidelines of the ASEAN summits. But the president notes his real goal was to meet with other world leaders to discuss issues faced by their nations and come up with possible solutions.
It's just talagang pakiramdaman mo na ano ba talagang problema? What do you want? What do I want? What can we do together? That's really what the bilaterals are for.
Let's pause for a quick break, but coming right up after that. What's next for the crypto industry after FTX filed for bankruptcy proceedings? More of that and other stories when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. You're still watching Businessworld Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. The national government's debt service bill surged to over 200 billion pesos in September on the back of higher amortization payments. Preliminary data from the Treasury Bureau showed the government made nearly 207 billion pesos in debt service payments. That's over 280% higher than the 54 billion pesos in September last year. Month-on-month debt service payments jumped by 203% from 68 billion pesos in August. Of the 207 billion pesos, more than 71% went to amortization, while the rest went to interest. Now, motorists can expect another round of mixed adjustments on fuel prices this week. According to a forecast by UniOil, companies may roll back diesel prices by 35 to 40 centavos per liter. That's effective tomorrow, November 15. Meanwhile, pump prices of gasoline may see an increase of up to 90 centavos. Despite the oil firm's outlook, the government says it is having a difficult time forecasting fuel price movements for this week. According to the Energy Department, this is due to events in the global market, such as rising interest rates in the US and Europe, lower global demand for oil supply, and the OPEC Plus decision to cut its production this month. Metro Pacific Investments is interested in taking over the operations and maintenance of the MRT-3 and the LRT Line 2 if the government bids out the contracts. This was confirmed to Businessworld by MPIC Chairman, President, and CEO MPIC Pangilinan. MPIC currently owns 35.8% of Light Rail Manila Corporation, which holds a 32-year concession to operate and maintain the LRT Line 1. The Marcos administration is now looking at partnering with private rail operators for MRT-3's O&M, as the rail line's assets remain government-owned. In 2017, a consortium composed of MPIC, Ayala Group, and Macquarie Infrastructure was granted original proponent status for the rehabilitation of the MRT. However, in 2020, the group decided it would no longer pursue the proposal. Now, authorities in the Bahamas will be conducting a criminal probe into the collapse of crypto exchange FTX. Government investigators are set to scrutinize FTX to see whether any criminal misconduct occurred led to the crypto empire's fall from grace. This comes days after the crypto exchange filed for bankruptcy. The company filed for bankruptcy shortly after rival Binance had backed out of a deal to rescue FTX in a buyout. Now, from a success story in the crypto space, FTX is now on a chaotic free fall from grace. And with the company's decision to file for bankruptcy, what can we expect to come next in the cryptocurrency industry? Investors and experts weigh in on the issue courtesy of this Bloomberg TV report.
A lot of people have compared this to Lehman. I would compare it to Enron.
I think the best thing that could happen to this market would be that it gets some regulation to give it some legitimacy.
I would say it would be a mistake to think, one, that crypto is one thing, and two, that crypto should have one regulator. Every agency, every department, every part of government at every level is going to have to deal with blockchain.
The fact that these exchanges are not allowing withdrawals or distributions is going to put a major dent in investor trust.
It's been somewhat disconnected from the broad market, in terms of the overall flows. So we're watching closely, but we don't think that's necessarily the systemic risk catalyst.
Now, what then becomes of the crypto market after FTX's meltdown? Does it still have what it takes to be part of mainstream portfolios? Let's get insights from Nichel Gaba, CEO of PDAX, or the Philippine Digital Asset Exchange. Nichel, good day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here, Jes. And I echo a lot of the sentiments that were shared earlier. Certainly, this is an issue that will bring about significant loss of confidence in the market, in what's already a very fragile crypto market at this time. The question in most people's minds is, if this can happen to somebody like FTX, which is becoming more of a mainstream name globally, then maybe it could happen to other unregulated players everywhere else.
But first, let's localize the issue here. How exposed are Filipino investors to FTX?
Based on what we know from the market, not as much, right? So Filipinos tend to flock to a different global unregulated player. Locally, we have a few regulated exchanges that don't have exposures to FTX. So impact may be minimal, but it's a $50 billion hole globally, right? And I imagine that there were Filipino clients of FTX that are badly affected, and there are also Filipino holders of FTT, which is now likely going to zero if it's not already at zero.
Okay, now, more to your point earlier, what does this do when it comes to crypto's credibility as an asset class?
Right. So I do think that over the past 10 years, we've been seeing crypto try to enter mainstream finance or mainstream consciousness. I think we're taking a bit of a step back here, right? Because FTX represented probably the first big sign in many years that the industry is working closely with regulators to try and create a safe space for investors. But Jess, this trend of moving towards regulation started long before FTX and its CEO Sam Bankman-Fried, and it's going to continue after that. So we're just taking a step back here, but probably longer term, we're going to see more regulation actually put into place.
What then is left to be done to make sure that the industry actually cleans up its act?
There's a couple of things, Jess, that I think the crypto industry has lacked globally, and that is regulatory clarity and regulatory enforcement. Fortunately for the Philippines, we actually have a lot of regulatory clarity. The Bangko Sentral has regulated the industry since way back in 2017. But I think our challenge here locally is more a matter of enforcement, right? We still have probably the largest crypto exchange operating actively in the Philippines outside of regulation. We still have a lot of Filipino users transacting in I would say riskier areas of the market. So there's still a lot that needs to be done in enforcement. But the Philippines, I think we're headed in the right direction here.
But how optimistic are you that there's still chance for crypto to actually be part of mainstream portfolios? What saving grace are you seeing here?
Yeah, so I think the fault of specific players in this industry do not actually dampen from the overall promise of crypto, and that is greater financial inclusion and greater economic freedom. Those selling points, if you will, or value proposition are still there. I think it just will take a lot more time and effort now on the part of incumbent players to try and rebuild that trust. But markets do tend to bounce back.
But how are you at least going to lift up sentiment here, considering the fact that there's been a series of fallouts already, even prior to FTX?
Right. While it's definitely a troubling development for the market that a lot of people are losing funds on these platforms, it might also end up proving to be a necessary development, right? This is I would say impossible to happen to an institution that's fully regulated, because institutions would be required to maintain assets back 1:1. Institutions would not be allowed to lend customer assets without their consent. So these behaviors have actually already been curbed in traditional finance, and we just need to see more of it in the crypto space. And I think it's actually incidents like this that would prompt regulators to enforce more strictly, and also for consumers to be a lot more discerning about where they put their funds into.
But we're talking about the crypto space. I mean, there are a number of lows, but there were also highs here. I mean, just a year ago, crypto was at an all-time peak. You have Bitcoin topping 67,000, and then some projections even pointing to above 100,000. Then Terra USD's collapse happened, and then you have Celsius filing for bankruptcy. What's happening to the ecosystem?
So I think we're still in the I hate to keep saying this because I think it's almost like a broken record now, but we're still in the very early days of the industry, right? So I would say that a lot of the applications that that you mentioned, the collapse of Terra and Luna. You also mentioned platforms that have had solvency issues this year. We're still in the process of really figuring out the fundamentals of what this new asset class can offer, right? And along the way, there will be hype cycles that create what we might call asset bubbles within the space. But it's also in the bursting of these bubbles and the ensuing controls put in place after that will see this space actually grow for the longer term.
Okay, but up to when do we see this early stages, so to speak, happening, and when do you see things maturing? And until then, how should investors take position?
I see two key things that need to happen, Jess. One is we actually need more trusted institutions enter the space. Now, granted, a key ethos of the crypto space currently is decentralization and, I guess, decentralized finance. But I also do think that financial services at the end of the day are about trust, right? And we need trusted institutions to start making its presence felt in the crypto markets. The other thing that I'm looking at, Jess, is the overall market environment. We're also living in a very tumultuous time, not just for the market, but also in geopolitics. And until that improves and inflationary fears are allayed, we probably will see a protracted bear market, unfortunately.
And more to that point, you have Bitcoin now revisiting lows. We've seen it bounce before. Do we see it happening again this time, or will it take an even deeper plunge this time around?
As you know, it's always very hard to predict where the market is going. If you ask somebody like 6 years ago, would you be happy to see BTC at $16,000? The answer would be a resounding yes. But yeah, that being said, because of this fallout by FTX, there are serious fears of contagion in the market, right? Just because we don't know who remains solvent or who is having solvency issues. So I do think that we would spend the next couple of weeks, maybe the next couple of months, figuring out who is actually hit and see them get relief via bankruptcy proceedings and whatnot, and then the space will likely be able to move on after that, and maybe we could see a more meaningful bounce after that.
But do you see that bounce at least happening before year end?
Probably, yeah. I do think that the emergence of any new technology introduces a lot of risk, right? Let's not forget that crypto as an industry has been around by just over a little over 10 years. We're still going to see a lot of innovation. This is not exactly the same that happened to Mt. Gox before. Certainly, the impact is just as disappointing, but the promise of crypto is still there, right? And I think there are very key lessons that we can learn from this, and that is one, you have to deal with trusted institutions, and there are trusted institutions, right? Those that are constantly examined and supervised by regulators. And the second lesson we can learn from this, as is parlance in crypto, not your keys, not your coins, right? So if you don't hold keys to your wallet addresses, then you are relying and you are trusting somebody to do so. And in this case, those who trusted FTX may be feeling a lot of disappointment. But let's maybe as a market of consumers continue to examine who in fact we trust with our assets.
Okay, trust a key issue here, of course, when we're dealing with the crypto market. Thank you very much for your time today, Nichel Gaba, CEO of PDAX.
Thank you.
And those are the biggest stories on the economic and corporate front today. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We are One News, all sides, all the time. Don't go away. We'll give you the latest on the local bourse when Businessworld Live returns. Stay with us. And you're still watching Businessworld Live here on One News. I'm Jes Delos Santos. We're just days away from the central bank hiking rates again. Of course, you have BSP Governor Felipe Medalla already announcing a 75 BP rate hike. And that might actually be a good excuse for investors to take profit, at least according to Cristina Ulang of First Metro. That's after stronger than expected GDP led to a rally last week. But that does not seem to be the case, at least at the first few minutes here of the trading week. As you can see here now, the main index increasing close to 0.4%. Again, breaching that 6,300 level at 6,310.18 to be exact. Gains here also happened on the back of China easing COVID rules, signaling the possibility of Beijing letting go of stringent zero-COVID policy, cooling U.S. inflation, also, of course, affecting those gains here, fanning talks of a dovish tilt here by the U.S. Fed. And given that, of course, let's have a quick check of how the peso is doing. As you can see right now, weakening a touch here, now at 57 spot 380 to the greenback. But back to the equity space here, let's check on our leaders and laggards. Let me just refresh this very quickly. But as you can see here, gainers at least leading the charts here. You have Converge up by 2 7/10%. A number of blue chips also up by more than 2%. You have their Megaworld and ICTSI there. Quite a number of stocks in the red. Emperador, especially most notably here, our worst performer so far, down by 2 4/10% as well. But more on that later. But let's focus first here on GT Capital. After earnings figures came in for the third quarter, they in fact more than tripled their profits for that particular period. Net income is at 6.65 billion pesos. Compare that to just 1.99 billion pesos a year ago. Revenues also increasing by 67% to 66.71 billion pesos over a 9-month period here. Notably, you have net income increasing by 72%. Revenue likewise increasing by 43% over that 9-month period. Again, you have their president Carmelo Maria Luza Bautista saying that the recovery momentum of their businesses remains steady despite, of course, rising inflation and interest rates, as well as volatility in the foreign exchange market. They're saying that their initiatives over the past years are now starting to bear fruit. Profit growth was driven, of course, by contributions primarily from Metro Bank as well as Toyota Motor and Federal Land. As you can see here, some gains here for GT Capital starting the day in the green at 399 pesos and 80 centavos a piece. That is up by close to 0.5%. And then lastly, let's have a quick check on Globe here after they did report their 9-month net income increasing by 48%. That's at compared to that 18 billion pesos year on year. They're now at 26.5 billion pesos for the 9-month period this 2022. Service revenue at a record of 118 billion pesos, pushed higher by corporate data and mobile services with some support from their non-telco services as well. They are on track with their 2022 network rollout with a capex of up to 14% to 74.4 billion pesos. Looking at how Globe is performing so far, however, one of the few blue chips in the red here, down by 2% to 2,254. And that's it for today, November 14, 2022. Join us again tomorrow at exactly 9:30 a.m. You can also catch us on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Jes Delos Santos. Stay safe, Philippines. We are One News, all sides, all the time.